Welcome to I've Always Wanted to Watch That, a spin-off podcast from the Average Joe's Movie Clubcast. I'm Justin. In this podcast, I get the exciting pleasure to interview fellow movie lovers and discuss films that they've never seen before, and I'll get to find out if it was worth the wait or not. In this episode, I'm welcoming back Paul Keelan to the AJMCC network as we both put on our thinking caps to discuss Andrei Tarkovsky's acclaimed existential sci-fi epic Stalker from 1979. Welcome back, Paul.
Thanks, Justin. It's great to be here. For the listeners out there, he's playing like an MJ stomach flu game right now. He's bowling through with a hoarse voice, so give him props for that. We're gonna make it happen. So thanks for having me on. It's exciting. I'm excited to talk about Stalker. I mean, what a film.
Let's briefly recap our podcast history together. It's an interesting one. Do you want to start?
Yeah, it's getting so long that I'm gonna maybe forget something, but not hopefully long enough yet. We started with Mighty Ducks, great discussion. Justin's from, I don't know if it's Minneapolis, but from Minnesota, so he's got some like hometowny feels for that movie. We've done a hockey movie. We did Youngblood. Is that correct?
Yep, did Youngblood. My folks are from the Twin Cities, so quite familiar with going there as a kid in the summer, check out the Mall of America. So that one definitely hits close to home. And then you came on our show, the Average Joe's Movie Clubcast. We talked about Jackie and
Inherent Vice.
That's right. And then go ahead.
Two great ones. I mean, Jackie, Pablo Larraín. I've since watched Emma, and his basically follow-up film to Jackie, which I don't know if I like more or less. Spencer, right? It definitely had more critical acclaim, it feels, by the end with Kristen Stewart's Oscar nom, but I kind of think Jackie's a bit stronger. That's just my take, but Emma is, I think, my favorite of all three, though. I don't know if you've seen Emma. Have you seen that?
I haven't seen Emma yet. I've seen the first 15 minutes of Spencer and I was hooked. Unfortunately, I had to hit the sack and get back to it. But then I saw I had two podcasts to get ready for. So hopefully tonight after this, be diving back into Spencer.
Awesome. Inherent Vice was all. I mean, you can't go wrong with P.T. Anderson. So that was a great time.
And then Joey and I came on for, was it the that really strange Italian movie, right?
It was extremely strange. We were doing our post-apocalyptic sports movies, and they came on for really one of the most bizarre, futuristic, it was with all of Fellini's crew, and it had Mastroianni and a lot of product placement. And I'm describing it because I'm buying time until I can figure out myself what this movie's called, because I can't believe we're both blanking on the spot for it. But I mean, it was basically the inspiration for Austin Powers, and we had a great time dissecting that one because it was a zany, underrated gem. I mean, just loads of fun, and none of us had even heard of it before. But it really went in with everything else, and I think it's the 10th victim. Is that correct?
That sounds right.
Yeah, that's it. So it's been a perfect complement to some of the other ones we did, like Endgame, not the Marvel movie, but a 1983 film, Rollerball and so forth. They all kind of go together really well. That's a great little cluster of movies we're doing over at Cinematic Underdogs. It's a cool little niche we've now like rolled with, and we're going to continue. Our next episode or so is Death Race 2000. So that'll be fun. A Stallone one.
All right, let's get into Paul's movie taste with our movie question blitz. So I've shortened it down to 20. I think 20 pretty solid questions. So let's get to know more about Paul's taste. So what are your feelings on writing about movies versus podcasting about them?
Oh, I mean, both are ways to explore, I think, critical reflections. It's, both are personal experiences. One's more collaborative, I would say, by far, and that's podcasting. That's the joy of that one. For a film like today, let's say Stalker, that's so sprawling and dialogue heavy and And I don't think it's as inscrutable as people say, but I think that it has so much to unpack that I enjoy this dialectical, like conversational platform for it almost more than writing about it. But there are films that I love to write about as well. So I don't have a preference. They both have their own pros and cons.
The interesting thing about writing, obviously, you can gather your thoughts, spew them out, and kind of go back over it and figure out if that's really what you want to say. Where the podcasting, as soon as you just say it, it's out there unless you go back and edit it. And you also have this discourse where bring different opinions into it as well. So yeah, very neat
Yeah,
to have
love the
a growing
spontaneity of the
experience.
yeah, I love the spontaneity of podcasting and the urgency of that, the exigency of having to speak on the fly. And you can't take back what you said. You fall into word salad moments where you jumble your ideas or your tongue slips, and you
Yeah,
kind
some
of gotta.
cliches.
Yeah, I mean, it happens, right? But that's part of the excitement, and it's part of the skill, like that rhetorical development, I think has helped in other areas of my life, especially as someone who was always more of like a cerebral wordsmith. And so being able to articulate my ideas more to kind of enter that old like college discussion, the
Mhm.
Socratic environment with friends via Zoom or whatever is awesome. I love it.
All right, what's something that instantly gets you invested in a film?
Hype. I mean, I don't necessarily buy into the hype, but hype is going to pique my interest. For example, Top Gun Maverick, right? I mean, it's getting some really fire takes. I mean, at first it was nearing the level of, I think, the latest Mad Max Fury Road, but now I've noticed it kind of soften a little bit. I don't expect it to be nearly like that level or caliber of like groundbreaking blockbuster, just tour de force, high octane fun. But I do think it's like an amazing dad movie from what I'm vibing on from people's takes, and like I'm so stoked. And that's just an example I'm using that's very current about how like hype is definitely going to draw my attention to something.
That's an interesting take on the question. I was actually looking for more of like, so for example, like when I'm watching Hunting for the Red October, like I'm instantly sucked in because it's all about like Russian history and stuff. So what are some like movie topics or maybe actors or just different elements that are like you didn't expect coming in, but then whenever you start watching it, you're like, buckle up, let's go.
Cool. I mean, it's just fun. I get to answer two questions in one then. I think
Yeah.
that I take multiple approaches to film throughout my life. And I have gone through phases. Like I've gone through those periods where I like to enter genres and kind of like try to explore all the signifiers and semiotics within a genre system. I've gone through binges on certain actors, more directors though. Like for example, I would go on a deep dive for all of Olivier Assayas. I probably botched his name, but the French director, right? He's slightly obscure, but like Irma Vip um, and Summer Hours. I mean, he just has so many like good little films. Personal Shopper. That's just like a one example, or uh,
That was Saint Maria, right?
yeah, exactly. The Clouds of Sils Marie is fantastic. It's his other one with Kristen Stewart. And I also love his, I don't know if they're husband, wife now or girlfriend, boyfriend, but I'm blanking on her name too. It's three names together, but she's made Eden. Last year she did one I have not seen yet. And it's with a couple talking about it's not Fellini. It's like a famous director. I'm totally blanking out on that one, but she's also awesome. She did the one with Isabelle Huppert, where she's a philosophy professor. I think it's called Things to Come. So Amia Hansen Love. Yes, I remembered her name. She's great too, by the way, if you haven't heard of her. But the list goes on. I mean, I love the Turkish director Ceylan. I mean, Winter Sleep, Once Upon a Time in Anatolia. He has, I think, one that's like Three Climates, I believe is the name, the translation. And every film of his is like Dostoevsky levels of intrigue and intellectual like entanglement, similar to Farhadi if you go to Iran. So I also like to follow like international auteurs. So yeah, I'm definitely an auteur student for sure.
Sweet. Do you have what's your first movie theater experience you can recall?
Ooh, that's tough. I don't actually know my very first, but perhaps the earliest memory is Shipwreck because it was the Disney film. It's very forgotten. It's not even strong in the like nostalgic, canon for our generation. But I just remember being terrified and my parents having to walk me out of the theater and then kind of like tiptoeing back in and kind of like standing in the back behind the seats to feel it out. So that sort of emotional intensity to the experience is the reason I definitely clutch onto that as my like first movie experience, but I'm sure it wasn't. I mean, there's so many seminal ones as a kid that we go on our podcast about, like Free Willy. Me and Jordan, my co-host, just like yelped with joy at the end of that. When they, not actually when Willie jumps over the rock, but when I forget who's driving the car, but they drive like a truck through a chain link fence to free him. And that moment was just like the moment. And Angels in the Outfield is our other one. We saw a double feature with that, The Lion King, like just this indelible little moment for us. Yeah. So, but there's so many. My parents took us every single weekend basically to almost 2 or 3 movies. We were definitely a movie going family.
So Shipwrecked, is that kind of like a Treasure Island feel to it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a Disney early 90s Treasure Island film. I should remember the scene where the shipwreck happened. I think it was like a big storm and really loud and dark. And that was enough for me. I mean, I was definitely, I think it was like 93. So I would have been 6. Um, Nothing legitimately scary in my mind. I definitely have been really pining to go back to that just to see if it even elicits or evokes memories because I don't remember almost anything about it besides that.
Yeah, childhood trauma is an interesting thing when you see back what kind of spooked you. Nothing really comes to mind about. I remember in the Care Bears movie, the bad guy in that, I think he's like a mirror or something, was kind of took me aback, but that's one of the ones I remember.
I forgot about the Care Bears movie. That's a great reference.
All right, what is your letterbox process? Yeah, just how did you discover it? How do you go about rating movies, writing about movies, interacting with other people?
A good question. We're both letterbox friends, right? That's where we found each other.
Yep.
I don't remember, and it's so recent how I first stumbled across it. But immediately I was drawn. I mean, it's a super sleek platform and it's run by an awesome team. They just curate it perfectly. They have these little Easter eggs. I just want to give a shout out to them. They're like the best social media platform and team and community. I mean, in terms of like positivity and self, I've heard some horror stories from like 1 or 2 friends, but just of like some troll who kind of went after them in
Um,
the comments. But besides that, I think it's really uplifting community for the
surprisingly
most
at
part.
surprisingly at a minimum. That does happen every now and then, but you surprising it's not more, especially
Yeah,
whenever you join different Facebook movie communities, it's very rampant there.
yeah. I mean, even film Twitter is kind of a crap show, but when you get to
Sure.
the community that really is dissecting film, like watching a lot of people's stories with empathy and trying to relate to them, you're going to get a pretty, I
Mhm.
think, mature group who become
Yeah.
softer in their biases and so forth. So that helps as well, right? The demographic is
Yeah.
already fine tuned for people who have an intellectual generosity or charity towards another person. In terms of rating and so forth, um, I've definitely pulled out a few rainy day reviews from the past. It's funny that I start with that because that's the least thing I do. But when I was first drawn to, right, like I spent like a week or so just like logging every single film I saw, making lists and doing that type of activity. And now it's basically my review platform because, I went on a blitzkrieg, I'll call it, and just like added a bunch of people and, just really did the grinding, mechanical, perfunctory, boring ass work of building a community. Some might have been annoyed by it. I think a few people blocked me just because they could tell I was liking a lot and befriending a lot. But it's been awesome. It worked out really well. Not because of my numbers, but because like I've found like about 80 to 120 like regular, you know, individuals who read my stuff, I read their stuff, we interact. I mean, I'm so busy now, I don't engage as much as I would like, but I definitely have a ongoing conversation with these people, and I know their taste a bit, and I know respect their opinions. I can see when I'm going to anyways diverge with their opinions, so I'm curious, but it doesn't affect me either way, for example. So that's awesome too. So I'm really happy. I mean, you know, we both have a high follower count. Yours is even higher, I believe. But you know, like most of it doesn't matter. Most of those people are forgettable. It's the people that are really just looking at your stuff and engaging and stimulating and writing comments, or just writing their own reviews that are awesome. That really is what keeps me going on there. I have now like written full reviews at cafes on my iPhone right after a movie in a frenzy. I remember Dune. I wrote like a huge review standing up, just immediately getting it off my chest. Sometimes I'll go into a Word doc and really sculpt something. So it runs the gamut in terms of my approach, but I'm a very prolific writer. Not to pat myself on the back, but I've written my whole adult life. It's my job, so it comes out of me like second nature. So I just kind of organically start putting things together. I like to blend hot takes, like the one-liners, if it comes to my mind, and like really summates the movie for me. And I don't want to expend too much energy on that movie per se. I don't care. I'll do it. I understand that like some of my friends really dislike that stuff, but I think there's a place and a time for it. And then I'll have reviews like Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is like almost a short story. I mean, I wrote like, I think probably 10,000 words almost on it. Or the White Tiger, just because I got stuck in this, like trying to dissect some parts of that movie that I felt were inflammatory in an intellectually disingenuous manner, even though as much as I went after that, I highly respect that movie, because you have to actually be doing something clever to actually rile me up enough, right? Like if it's truly dumb and superficial and facile, I'm just gonna brush it aside. So I'm not trying to diss that so much, but it really sparked something in me. So yeah, it's been a really cool process for that, and just a great platform to keep me active and balance my ratio of consumption to digestion. I always think of that like consuming content and digesting content. Digesting is the thinking, reflecting, processing, and putting it to paper. It could be a conversation too, but either of those, you if there's an imbalance of that, you start to feel it. I start to feel weighed down and bogged down by it. I went through that period where I was like a film student buff. I was living overseas. I'd watch 7 or 8 movies a weekend, and it was hard to keep up with that pace. So I would frantically be writing notes, but like it didn't feel balanced still. Like the equilibrium was off. And so I really enjoy Letterboxd. There's this incentive, this extra push to like, you watch something, you write about it because you're excited. You have people reading it. Now I'm rambling on and on, but yeah, that's kind of all my real thoughts of Letterboxd. I love it. I try to tell everyone to join.
One of my reactions to what you said was the fact that even if I don't like a movie, I'm gonna on Letterboxd, when I log it, I'm going to try to explain why I didn't like it, because eventually, you are going to have those people that are going to come at you being like, why'd you think this or that? And a lot of time you kind of wish they'd actually go through your review and fine when you make these points. But and I also feel with Letterboxd, like you have this profile and you're kind of building a presence. It's not so much of like just commenting here or there, like on Twitter, Facebook, about like your thoughts on something. It's more about building a profile, being a part of a community. So
yeah, I agree. And
so,
I interestingly enough really enjoy your model, and it reminds me of a more elaborate form of what I was doing when I was watching a lot. But I love the pragmatism of it, the economy of it, and the like mnemonic functionality of your style. So like just for our listeners who don't read Justin's reviews as much, and I don't know if this is true for every single one, but he's kind of like a very bulletin point oriented reviewer where he likes to kind of go through the movie, not quite chronologically, but definitely put like bulletin points. I love that. It's very easy. It's very legible. It allows him to put a lot of details that he would forget. So he's going to I'm speaking for you, but what I love about it is you're going to be able to go back to movies 5 years from now and quickly recall all those states. It really helps with memory recall. But you also put enough to really get a little deeper into your thoughts, right? So my problem is when I was doing the binging, right, like of films, I did very, very almost disassociative recall. Like I would write a few words, like a few words, a few words, a few words, a few words, a few words. And then like when I would go back to it, it was almost a puzzle. It was so enigmatic because it was just like this bizarre poetry. Didn't spend just the extra few seconds to like construct and craft sentences, which you do. So I love that. You have cohesive thoughts, and I kind of have one form that I do like that. I always have this. It's like 5 takeaways or 7 takeaways. That's one style review I do like every so often. Where I'm like, I don't really know if I have a cohesive thought on this film, but I have a lot of thoughts. I'm going to do, what I call my bulletin point approach. I want to say this. I want to say this. I don't necessarily want to spend all this time, linking these in a tenuous manner sometimes, these ideas together, So I absolutely love that. I love that episodic type of criticism.
Yeah, I think that cuts out some of the fluff when you do it a bulletized style, because you might only have one thing to say about the cinematography, and you're left trying to form the rest of a paragraph, and you end up wasting time figuring out how exactly you want to wrap it up with it being in paragraph style. So yeah, I find that bullets let you get directly what you want to say. I come from a journalism background, so I try to have strong leads with my openers. It was, I think, Dr. Strangelove. When I watched that, I think I collected about 12 quotes from IMDb when I was writing my review. I'm like, I really like putting these quotes in. These really kind of help get things moving, make things lively. So incorporated that as part of my style. And yeah, I appreciate the compliments. It's definitely been a long process. And I definitely had that imbalance of spending more time actually writing about the movie than watching the movie. I've struggled with OCD in the past. So the anxiety of making sure it's like fit to print kind of was always weighing on my mind. So I've gotten that under control a little bit. And yeah, just really appreciate the kind words about my writing.
Personally, though, just as is my personal opinion, is that imbalance is much better than the opposite, just because it's a rarity in our culture. I mean, we're a culture of like mass consumption. So I will definitely take the person who over tinkers with their thoughts and the labor of reflecting on what they're consuming than the person who just over consumes. That's just me though. So I would definitely almost preach that, because I think those aren't so much indulgences as like development, personal maturation. So, but that's for me. That's kind of like I'm a pro. I guess that's like active versus passive being, right? Because there's engagement. It's not like you're consuming mindlessly ever, right? Every single individual is actively engaged, but it's really hard to keep the dialectic internally going on. And so if you're overly being crammed with content, right, you at some point, I think, sort of become blunted intellectually, and you're not deciphering things at a high level. And so like especially when I do podcasts, but even when I'm not, I have my little notes on my iPhone going, and I'm just writing notes while I'm watching movies. It takes a little bit of the visual way. I mean, I almost do it without looking, so that's pretty awesome.
So you don't
But
pause?
if I have to, or if I have to go back, so like Stalker was difficult because the dialogue was so rapid fire that I was trying to, untangle some of their philosophical existential musings, and then they would just keep going and going and going. Sometimes I don't want to even stop. That's like so dangerous sometimes to stop a flow of a movie, especially 2 hour and 40-minute movie. Just for me, I don't want to lose that rhythm I got with it. So if I miss a few things, but I get it like expand or dilate a few moments a little, larger, I'll do that trade-off. There's every second's a trade-off, right? Every second of life, you're augmenting something and silencing something else, just with your perspectival, orientation. So yeah, I'm getting really overly, I don't know, critical and cerebral here, but I think
No
that,
worries.
yeah,
Just the warm up for the big show, right?
for sure. I mean, it's fitting for our topic, right? I mean, what a weird weird space Tarkovsky created. So, anyways, before we get there, though, let's move, I guess, to the next question.
Yeah. Question 5 is name a favorite director in their best and worst films.
Okay. Yes, that's so
In your
hard.
humble opinion, of
In
course.
my humble opinion, there's so many that I appreciate. I really want to name a director that doesn't get enough recognition, but I am feeling on the spot. I mean, my favorite of all time that's an American director is so obvious and so common, but I do love P.T. Anderson. I would say his best film. I love Phantom Thread. Actually, I saw that like the second row, and I get like There Will Be Blood, but I do think the last 15 minutes of There Will Be Blood works on some levels and is completely ludicrous and absurd and inane on other levels. And I don't know. It's it's uh it's a mixed bag for me as much as I absolutely love it too. I mean, Daniel Plainview, and there's moments in that movie that transcend most of American cinema by leaps and bounds. So I'm definitely no critic of that. That's like a almost plus film for me. But his latest one, I was more divided upon the one, than I think some of the up and comers who are being turned on to him for the first time. I'm talking about Licorice Pizza. I liked it a lot, but there were some parts that I felt were a little bit gratuitous, a little overwritten. I'm thinking like the long scene. I forget the name of the restaurant, the kind of like darkly lit restaurant with the Sean Penn moments in there that turned into like the motorbike scene. I thought that Bradley Cooper's cameo was unhinged and fun, but totally off tone for the film, and also felt it didn't feel as like brave and bold. It's like just a little bit of self-aggrandizing. And I don't know if I would love to hear more how much Cooper just took that and ran with it. There's a lot of ego attached to some of these cameos by the big stars, and that I think detracted from the really sweet, earnest story of a interesting entrepreneur that I thought was really fascinating and well done. But yeah, I thought that it was more of a mixed bag. It reminds me of like a little bit of more late Tarantino, a little loose around the edges, and there's pros and cons to that. And so, yeah, I guess I'll just stick with him because I would say, Phantom Thread, which came out, just before, I believe. I don't think he had any films since. I think it's gone Phantom Thread and Licorice Pizza, right? In that order, or is there something I'm missing? Yeah. I think that is just a meticulous film. It's the precision, the score by Johnny Greenwood, the performance by Daniel Day-Lewis, the last act twist with the mushrooms, the love dynamic, the grotesque and almost psychopathic psychology. I mean, all of it. I absolutely adored. I was floored by it because I wasn't expecting to love it so much. I was a little tentative going in. It felt like it looked like a staid period piece, like this like little British period piece, and it was anything but that. So definitely the element of surprise worked there for me. So yeah, I picked a very cliche director, but I'll stick with it.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned Tarantino because Once Upon a Time in America and Licorice Pizza definitely both had hangout vibes, and I liked how PTA pulled that off a little better than Tarantino. Although Once Upon a Time has grown on me somewhat since the first time I saw it. Not
Yeah,
to
I
say
mean,
it's a bad film.
I would love to see them both back to back again. I think PTA still had better characters in Licorice Pizza. The last thing about it is I really did not appreciate the ending so much. I did not like how she just runs into his arms. I liked the arc in which they were drifting apart. I felt that like she was seeing his immaturity and his it's not toxic masculinity, that's such a loaded term, but she was starting to see these pathological habits that they were showing in the Bradley Cooper character. I forget his name, and there's some great parallels in this moment when they're out of gas and so forth, and she's seeing Bradley Cooper and seeing Gary Cooper. I forget the actor's his name in the movie, but both their names. But she was kind of looking back and forth, and there was this moment of conflation between the two characters. And then a few scenes later, she's running to like the arcade opens up, and I don't know, it didn't work. It didn't work for me at all, that ending. So yeah, definitely a slight disappointment for me in terms of his catalog.
Fair enough. Okay. What is the first movie that got you thinking about film as an art?
Ooh, it would be Fallen Angels by Wong Kar-wai or Faces by Cassavetes. That was in college. I mean, I loved film always before then, but those two films reinvented my entire understanding of what film could be. Shout out to my professor, Daniel Coffeen, one of the smartest people alive. He has an awesome catalog of lectures that are still in the vault, still online, still downloadable. If you just Google search Daniel Coffeen and emphatic oomph or Berkeley podcast, you might be able to dig them and exhume them. They're somewhere on the web. And if you're a film buff, they're the greatest things that no one ever listens to. I mean, why would you? They were from his rhetoric class, but he like showed a bunch of Wong Kar-wai films. He showed, I remember Wes Anderson films, Cassavetes films, and just, I think the man thinks unlike anyone else. You know, he did his dissertation on Greek and Socratic, and then postmodern philosophers like Deleuze and Guattari and Lacan, and he just brings all these crazy high level critical lenses to films, but makes it very manageable for like digestible. It doesn't fly above your head. Like Zizek, who I love too, but sometimes he goes so far into his Lacanian psychoanalysis that you feel like he's not even really caring about the cinema form. It's just like a set of symbols for him to explore his psychoanalyses. Whereas I felt like Caffeine does a little bit of the same because he's definitely bringing his worldview into it, but it works better. It just works better because he's got these great ideas of like just image and how image relates to image in sequential ways. So yeah, that course was called Seeing. So there's a doubling in the name of that course. He invented it himself, but it was like about the process of seeing in films that make you see yourself seeing. And yeah, it might feel a little dated now that meta fourth wall type discourse is second nature. I felt like when I was in college, I'm dating myself, but it was a good 15 years ago. It was still a little fresher in the zeitgeist, but I still think there's merit to those. So yeah.
Any movie pet peeves?
Growing one is the multiverse for Marvel to go after an easy low hanging fruit. It's just unnecessarily obtuse. I don't want to do homework for something that brings no ontological or existential depth. That's just connecting lines so that I can, I don't know, basically be abducted by their canon. I feel like it's a cash grab in a way. The whole Easter egg universe of tropes is both. It can be fun. I'm not like a Scrooge or a cynic. I mean, my co-host loves Easter eggs, and I get why he enjoys them, and I get the incentive. But sometimes I feel like they're used with nefarious impulses by studio heads to like force you to watch every single thing. And now those films just feel bogged down. They're just heavy, boring. They're such a slog to me. I mean, I totally respected what Sam Raimi did with Doctor Strange, but on a narrative level and so forth, it's just the multiverse. You have to do too much to be on point with the developments of the story. So that's my latest peeve.
Oh, it's probably just beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I was
See what happens with Loki season 2, and
it's gonna get worse and worse. Yeah, they're gonna lose a lot of people by the wayside because I've been expressing it, and a lot of people are coming out of the. I mean, just in my circle, I'm sure there's other parallel instances of this, but a lot of people are like agreeing with me. I'm not like proud of that for anything. I'm just seeing a lot of, consensus on this that wasn't there maybe 3 or 4 years ago when they had it better controlled. And I feel like with even I think, well, Spider-Man was fun. Spider-Man worked better, to be honest, with the huge cameos and so forth. I mean, just an exploitative maneuver to bring in our favorite beloved Spideys from 3 different iterations. I mean, that was fun. Why not? But it also, there's something to be said for when there's no rules, there's no gravity, there's no gravitas, and they're stripping the rules with this like multiple universe idea, the string theory. I mean, mortality loses its you know, intensity. Everything loses it. Everything's diluted when you start to play with, I don't know, metaphysics in that way. I feel like it's cheap. It's an insult to the essential mortality of our state. I mean, I get that string theory is possible, but we still have to confront, you know, the possibility of nullity, which is what Tarkovsky does, and that's why the movie is so bleak and haunting. Marvel, it's just it's this new religiosity that's, I think, kind of grotesque. This idea that you know, there's just iterations of things going on, and subtly, I think they're trying to make people, I don't know, untether themselves from like existential, I don't know, reflections and meditations, because they're not treating that idea as it should be treated, like everything everywhere all at once, which goes the exact, that's everything Marvel should be doing. And I'll just leave it at that.
Really need to see that still.
Oh, it's amazing, amazing, groundbreaking cinema. I mean, get to it before it leaves theaters. I mean, nothing like it in the past 20 years, definitely since like, I mean, it's like going to the Matrix in 1999, or seeing Being John Malkovich when it was in theaters, for example, or something like that. So check it out.
Nice. What's a movie you enjoyed but you would never want to visit it again?
It's a very tough question. Probably, it's hard for me to go back and see like The Sacrifice again, even though by the end of, I'm talking about Tarkovsky again.
Yeah.
It wasn't the most pleasurable viewing experience, but
Yeah, that's my least favorite from him.
yeah, but man, there's some moments in that are searing and that stick with you. It's got that insanely famous final shot of the burning house. It's gorgeous, but
Right.
man, so much of that was inscrutable. So we'll get into it later, but I feel like that movie is really hard to parse. And so yeah, that would be one I would not be gung-ho on revisiting, but I respected the hell out of when I watched it. So yeah.
Do you own any movies? Any special ones for you?
What was that? Do I own any?
Mm-hmm.
No, not anymore. I mean, I've lived too many places, and so I don't
Yeah.
have any DVD catalog, whatever. I have a digital catalog that I won't explain how I've archived, but I have a lot. I have some external drives that are filled with gems. But yeah, nothing
Okay.
owned. I don't have any analog physical films.
Yeah, no problem. So what are your thoughts on streaming versus, getting in the theater? I mean, based on the praise of everything, everywhere, all at once, sounds like you're pretty big theater advocate.
Yeah, for the right films. I mean, you're not going to replicate that experience. You're going to be hard pressed to stay as focused when it's on your TV. You're not going to be able to easily commit yourself if you have any level of ADHD. I mean, I'm pretty focused on, stuff, but even today with the cell phone, it's extremely hard to not be browsing a little bit while you're watching anything. So get into that theater when you have that social contract that forces you to not look at your cell phone. If you do, you have to be extremely secretive and quick with it. So yeah, that's probably the primary reason, just by sticking with it. I mean, yeah, there's all the qualities of the scope and the size and the sound, but then you're also dealing with like people who talk too much, or I don't know,
Feel too
cough or
much.
ruffle their plastic candy the whole time. I mean,
Mhm.
there's some definite irritations of going out to the cinema that I will not deny. Like, and I get
Cost. Jeez.
the cost too. I mean, if you do have AMC's, though, I mean, that's ridiculously affordable, that $20 a month, 3 a week. And you can't really, unless you're me 5 years ago, see more than 3 a week anyways. So, you're paying 20 a month for unlimited movies. So I see that is one of the cheapest ways to find entertainment these days. I mean, you go to a bar for one Friday night, you're going to spend $20 in an hour, on a drink or two. If you, I don't know what else people do, but I mean, anything costs more.
Some fries.
Yeah, if you go to one sports event, right, you're going to pay triple that. So that's 3 months of movies. I'm just trying to like put that in people's mind. That's 36 movies you could have watched for that 3 hours at a baseball game. Like, what is more experientially rewarding? 36 hours of highly, compact, energetic, ferociously creative and imaginative entertainment, or 3 hours of a dude throwing a baseball, halfway up the bleachers when you have to pay $15 to buy a hot dog. Like, I mean, the movie prices are ridiculous too for food, but you could smuggle it in so easily. It doesn't matter. So yeah, go to get the pass if you have it. Go to the movies.
It's a good idea. All right. What's a movie you can think of that you relate to the most, as you totally see yourself in this picture?
Wow, so like that I put my self image into, and I'm like, that's me. There's some highly relatable stuff out there that's almost painful to watch. So much of it, though. I mean, I loved Normal People, which is not a movie; it's a series on Hulu. Just a beautifully rendered series that I think is highly relatable. There's weird stuff that's not so relatable, but it's so human that it makes it like you almost think it's relatable, but you're not like the character, like Shithouse, a great indie film, fantastic. And it's like, wow, that's humanity. Like that's people. I mean, something even like Red Rocket, I'm probably, hopefully, almost the antithesis of Rex in that film, the lead. But I don't know, he's so familiar, some of his personality traits and nuance in a weird way. And it was such a dangerous and daring thing for Sean Baker to do, is take this taboo of a quote unquote groomer and soften the edges a bit and make him, I don't think he makes him likable, but he makes him charismatic. He makes him nuanced. He makes you question your, your preconceptions about him to a degree. And then, he punishes you for it a little bit and so forth. But I don't know, they're just great characters. And if there's a great character, you can see yourself in them, even if that's not you, right? Because I mean, maybe, I think there's a little bit of everyone in everyone. And so, we have the ability to, some ability to sculpt autonomously ourselves. So yeah, I see myself in some of the worst characters on screen ever, but that's the fortune of that is it helps me, catch those impulses and those proclivities before I manifest them. So yeah.
Question 12. All right, you're tired, you've had a few drinks. What's the movie you pop on that you watch all the way through? And what's one that you would pop on that you're not going to make it through, but it's all good?
Tired a few drinks. So this is like my go-to. I'm having a blast watching my favorite movie type thing.
Yeah, like New Year's Eve. I mean, you're pretty sauced, and you definitely are going to finish this movie because it's so kinetic. And then the same thing on the other hand, where it's not as kinetic, but you're going to enjoy it. And you're going to fall asleep watching, and it's going to be okay.
Yeah, so definitely got to be a comedy for the one where I have a few drinks. I mean, there's nothing better when you have a few drinks in you to be cracking up. And so like if I'm going with my like childhood, easy, all-time laughing nostalgic comedy, maybe like Happy Gilmore. But I would say like the best comedy in the past, like, I don't know, decade or so, easily is I'm the Game Night one, the Game Night with Jason Bateman. So that was the one I want to pick. I mean, that's just this easily turn it on again, and I don't have to finish that one either, because however far you get, you're gonna enjoy. I mean, it's just like so well paced and scripted and hilarious. Yes, that's my answer to that one. Game night.
Nice. Do you ever stop watching a film in the middle and just walk out, turn it off?
At the
Doesn't interest you?
theater, well, all the time. I'm uh, uh, near, no, it's too extreme, but I'd call myself like a nocturnal narcoleptic individual. I can't stay awake past 9. We made a joke about Stalker last night that I couldn't believe that I stayed up the whole time because I put it on like around 9. And we usually watch these like Red Scare or some zombie movie, and I can't stay awake. But somehow this slow, meditative Russian film I was sticking with every second for 2 hours and 40 minutes. So that was funny. But yeah, I usually watch movies in 3 sittings, unfortunately, and I get, and that's why I go to the theaters though. That's the sole purpose. It makes me stick with it. When I'm at home, it's usually a 3 sitting experience these days because life's busy. It's hard to stick with it from start to finish. So yeah, I always rehash a lot of scenes because I always like have to start 5 minutes before, but that adds to it at least. But there's something that's missing. You're missing the rhythms, the full composition. There's it's like a musical element to film that is lost if you're watching in 3 sittings. I get all that. So it's a shame, but I still want to be able to fit it in, and however I can, I will.
Yep, very much relate to that. Um, let's see here. What's your favorite movie to recommend to friends? Kind of that's off most people's radar. It comes up and you're like, yeah, you gotta check this out.
There's a few, but I'm gonna just name one right off the top of my mind. Victoria. I think it's with a K. It's a German film. It's shot in one shot, and it's not gimmickry. It's not Birdman. It's not. I think Gravity tried to kind of do that. There's a lot of films that try to do that, right? The whole one shot trickery. It's literally, legitimately, undeniably a one shot film. It's, I believe, 2 hours and like 10 minutes in running time, maybe shortly under it. It starts off in a Berlin nightclub, and it's about the titular character, Victoria, this single female in her 20s. She meets a group of guys, kind of falls for one. They kind of hang out on rooftops in cafes. And then it turns into this insane, uh, it goes into a genre. I don't want to give anything away, but it doesn't feel unbelievable. Maybe slightly, but the fact that they did it all in one take and every scene is incredible. It's unreal. I don't know if you've seen it, but man, that's the film.
It's been recommended to me, so I should finally pull the trigger. Have you ever seen Russian Ark? Kind of does the same thing in more of a probably artsy fartsy way.
No, I have not seen that, so I'll put that on my list as well.
It's essentially a tour through the Hermitage a museum in St. Petersburg, I believe it is. But yeah, it's just one shot. It kind of weaves Russian history together in that kind of style. So it's worth
Nice.
checking out.
Yeah, then no, I'll definitely put that on my list.
What's a movie that gets way too much hate?
Way too much hate. There's a few out there that I don't understand why people didn't see the old-fashioned joy of it. But I don't want to be a champion of it necessarily. Like last year, I think Red Notice, I thought, like, I get it. People are just sick of Ryan Reynolds' shtick. But I felt like it was coming after the pandemic period where we didn't have any like big cheesy globe-trotting blockbusters with some chase scenes and stuff. And I thought it hit for me all the beats it needed to for its genre. So that's one. I mean, that's not one I would love to tout, but I mean, when you're on the spot, it's a little difficult. So that was one I was a champion of. Oh, got another one, Space Jam 2. Space Jam 2. Everything that all these films do today, it does. And for some reason, everyone jumped on it as being this like cash grab, IP, soulless, whatever. It's Space Jam, people. It's the one that has the excuse to do it. It's nothing but that. It's based off of a commercial. It's based around a star basketball player. It's got Looney Tunes. Why not do whatever? I thought it was fun, ridiculous. The Easter eggs worked for me because they were so absurd. They just bordered on insane, and you didn't have to know anything. It was just spotting stuff and pointing it out. I mean, I thought it worked. They went broke for it, and I laughed and giggled and enjoyed myself. So I thought it was way better than Space Jam one. Way better. I watched them back to back because of our pod. So that's the one for me. Space Jam 2.
All right. When you're watching a film, do you prefer it to take a more subtle route or pack more of a punch? And this is very subjective, but your first instinct on this.
Yeah, my old self definitely more subtle. I love mumblecore. I'm like Mr. Mumblecore. My new self, I noticed myself a little more fatigued from daily life. I've noticed that like relationship to my film watching, I've been loving. I mean, just adoring these films that I would scoff and roll my eyes at. Like this past weekend, we went out and saw Uncharted, right? And that is a film that I would go along with the crowd and say, yeah, it was likable, whatever at the end, but I'd like literally viscerally enjoyed it. I've been doing that frequently lately, and I think it's because it's the escapism is hitting in all the right spots because I need escape, unlike before when I would like, more a college student or I had more cushion in my life, more free time. I wanted something a little more intellectually dense, a little something to really get in, sink into, something that I had to work more at. Now I am just really enjoying like, you know, uh, mindless entertainment. I've been really on that wavelength lately. Like Army of the Dead. I think it was last summer, or was it 2 ago? I mean, I was a huge fan of Army of the Dead. It took me back to like Independence Day type vibes, like the Will Smith one. So I was just like,
Yeah.
this is such a great 4th of July movie. I mean, I was like so on it, I watched it again. It's good. It's it's not like the greatest thing ever. Strong opening, really strong opening. I love anything in Vegas, so that I'm kind of already susceptible to its charms, but I'll still tout it. I still liked it a lot. So yeah, I'm definitely right now into like the blockbusters, into more plastic, loud frills. I'm enjoying it.
Question 17. Name an underrated classic.
Oh, there's so many. I'm gonna go with Lee Chong Dong, Burning, because the Parasite cult is frustrating. Parasite is good, serviceable. I get why it hits. It's smart enough, but I mean, it's kind of a hit you over the head metaphor in Parasite, and I don't know. Why would I hate on it? It's a great film. It's pulling off of like High and Low, I would say a little bit. So now I'm talking about Parasite real quick. It's got, just great mission scenes, beautiful setting, has all the elements that work. And Bong Joon-ho is amazing and so forth, as well. For the things I like more lately, for those more, direct cinematic beats. But Burning Man, what a softly, subtly creepy film that really taps into this existential dread of the younger generations. It has scenes that give me full on chills and goosebumps. There's a scene where they're at like sunset and the female character does this dance, and then starts to cry. I mean, unreal. And all of Lee Chong Dong's work. He has another film called Poetry. I think it's a translation of the word Korean she. He has another one called Secret Sunshine about a woman through a spiritual crisis. Oh, my bad. I'm not sure if Poetry is his. I think it is. Yes, Poetry is his. I was confused real quick with Mother, another one name film, and that's Bong Joon-ho again. But anything by Lee Chong Dong, check it out. I mean, he is next level. He is the true Korean auteur that I love. And I mean, they have some great ones. I love Hong Song-soo, that only like cinephiles like. I feel he's kind of like the Woody Allen of Korea, these little, but much more cerebral, but he makes these little larks, these little hour-and-a-half movies that feel so slight and off the cuff, but have a lot to unpack at the end. So yeah.
What is a movie that is guaranteed to get your waterworks going?
There's probably better ones, but the ones we'd always talk about on our podcast are the sports movies genre, which we focus on, would be Rudy. It's hard to deny the charms to that.
Mhm.
Doesn't quite get my waterworks, but Karate Kid was getting the feels. There were some scenes in that we did a live showing of that.
Mhm.
When Daniel-san learns the meaning of all these menial tasks he has to do, it really starts to hit. And then there's a really dark scene that's pretty um, that just it's surprisingly deep for that film, with Mr. Miyagi being drunk and revealing his past. So yeah, those two easy ones, but there's better ones. I know. I remember The Green Mile. This is uh, totally just explaining how I felt at the time. I haven't seen it since. I have a feeling I would be much more cynical towards that film today, but I remember walking out of that movie just haunted and so like fraught and destroyed by it. And the other one too was Armageddon, which so cheesy, but I remember watching that and like it ruined my 4th of July. It just was like too sad.
Poor Bruce Willis.
Yes, poor Bruce Willis. I mean, today I'd probably laugh, but I definitely it caught me at whatever age I was, 11.
All right. If you were a filmmaker, what would be your dream project?
Dream project as a filmmaker. Uh, I was thinking a lot about Stalker and the fact that when you have tools and you have the potential to do stuff, you do it, and it's almost its own trap. And so I was thinking less is more. So if I was a filmmaker, I would try to keep frugal with my filmmaking techniques, kind of like Dogma. Is it 95? The Troop
Yep.
with Von Trier. This and
Oh, the
the
Celebration. I just recently saw that, and that's Dogma 95 done right.
Nice. I've not seen that. I'll put that. That's on the top of my list. Um,
Bestin.
yeah, I mean, I loved Another Round even last year, which is way more mainstream for them. But Wittenberg. But yeah, I love their ethos of restraint, of less is more. The same person who does that a lot is Godard. I mean, everything Godard does is interesting. It's not always entertaining, but it's always interesting. So I love these brazen directors that are more intellectual. So yeah, I would say I would do something like that. That's more just unlike anything you've ever seen. A film that would fit all these questions that I haven't mentioned is 2 or 3 things I know about her. It's a Godard film.
Okay.
That was my favorite film for a long time, and so something like that I would do. Just something really off the like map of contemporary American cinema.
Nice. And finally, question 20. What are some of your film watching goals for the future?
It's a tough one. I'd have to adapt with, life. I do want to, after watching Tarkovsky last night, interweave some of these classics more, some of these criterion, just have that finely tuned balance of films. The more I really want to hopefully find a better community constantly that's local, that loves watching good cinema. It's actually tougher than I thought. I remember I really became a film nerd in Korea. Like that was my second coming in film.
Okay.
And then I was like, yeah, when I get back, I'm gonna like find that there's got to be, in every city, tons of people, and there kind of is. I'm kind of finding it here. There's a great theater and so forth, and a lot of podcast screenings and stuff. But just getting that like that energy around it, because that's awesome if you can get other people to do like weekly or monthly, you know, group events or trips to go see like we saw the North why am I blank Northman, right? uh we saw an early screening with all the film buffs that were out here
Nice.
in Arizona, and yeah, it just the excitement you feel it in the air when it's actually people that are super into cinema, so want that.
One of these days, I would love to have like, I'm not a very frequent churchgoer, but sometimes I attend, and
Yeah,
to curate a church or religious film club, I think that would be very
that would be
interesting.
awesome. Yeah, and I always give a shout out to Aaron. I feel like in every episode I'm on somehow, but Aaron of Filling Film is also from that background. And
Okay.
I don't know the podcast, but he was inspired by a podcast that was Christian host who always took popular films that were not, rooted in, the texts or, faith philosophies of evangelicalism, and would try to see it through that lens. And so I know that's out there. It's just a quick recommendation. So I'll try to pass that along to you off the air if I could find it or dig it up. But yeah, that's rad. That's rad. The same idea though, right? Just bringing people together to appreciate film.
Yeah, find that person that feels passion of Christ or last temptation is blasphemy, and dig into that. Why do you feel that way? Kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
And what was really cool, as he was saying, is like the focus of this podcast, which was like a Christian podcast, was to do films that were very not in the, in
Secular.
this, very secular films. That's the easy way to say it, right? And then, to try to transplant the themes and ideas onto them. This is very, very potent, very cool. I mean, I'd be intrigued by that, because I kind of come from the opposite direction where I'm very secular, but I do like to look at, I do like that approach. I took in college a New Testament as literature class, right? I mean, it's, groundbreaking text and so forth. So yeah, that's rad.
I mean, licking my chops for Stalker coming up. And a fun fact, I only had to change one word in this upcoming tease, since the last movie I did on this show was Annihilation. Very similar. So
That's
right after the break, we will dare to enter the zone. So stay with us. May everything come true. May they believe. May they laugh at their passions. For what they call passion is not really the energy of the soul, but merely friction between the soul and the outside world. So, Paul, how long did it take you? Okay, let me rephrase this. How long has Stalker been on your radar, and what kept you from popping it in, however you watch movies?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's great that you asked me this. It's been on my radar forever, I feel, which is not forever, since college at least. And definitely not before then. I don't think I would have heard of Stalker before college, but I watched The Sacrifice during the pandemic, and I got on a Tarkovsky, didn't go further, but like one Tarkovsky is quite a lot. It sticks with you. So I was like, definitely, I want to watch more. I watched Solaris a few years before that. And I was always drawn to this one, and it was just sitting there. And, after The Sacrifice, it was hard for me to motivate myself to get into another one. So you're like, what's a movie you've been wanting to watch for a while and haven't gotten to? I was like, that one. I need that external accountability to make myself sit through this one. And I'm very glad I picked it. I was the perfect choice, at least for me, for this topic and this podcast. So thanks for lending the opportunity, and I'm glad to be here to talk about it.
At first, I was a little begrudging because this is my third time seeing Stalker, but actually, kind of following back to our conversation earlier, I was pausing rapidly through this to kind of jot down my little notes on each part of this really rapid text. So actually getting to really dissect what's said in this film, because this is a very spoken word / visual splendor kind of movie. So it was cool to really break it down from that perspective. So I'm excited to dive into those themes, because I quickly read your Letterboxd review, and I'm not sure if we're on the same wavelength. So I can't wait to hear about metaphysics, I think was the term you had dished out there.
Oh yeah, I mean, I started to see it as you could see it as anything, right? It's such a huge metaphor, right? You could see it as Chernobyl. You could probably see it in political or socioeconomic terms, even. You could see it in very literary terms, right? Because the characters, they're archetypes, right? There's the professor, the writer, and the stalker, the guide, kind of. Interesting fact. Yeah, go ahead.
Mhm.
There's
I'll go ahead. Sorry.
back and forth. No, I'll let you go.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of that, just the very bizarre, simplistic naming style between you have what Porcupine as the mentor and Monkey as the little girl. For such a complex film, it's such a juxtaposition that the characters are so simplistic.
I do think that's what gives it its timeless feel, though, and its
Mhm.
allegorical feel. So it's very allegorical, but unlike normal allegories, it's not easy in the sense that there's not like one affirmative lesson by the end. There's like a dozen would sell it short. There's like a bazillion morsels and nuggets of wisdom to pull from it, but there I don't know. I don't feel like there's any overarching but I'm sure people can take it, whatever was the predominant theme or motif for them or truth for them. Um, and you can easily take from like the last shot of the daughter and of her breaking the laws of physics. Um, I've even read a take where someone tried to bring it back into physics and say possibly a train was nearby moving that glass on the table. That was ludicrous to me. I don't think that was being at all articulated by the film. The sound of the rail car tracks was and I'm going way too far now, but when they enter the zone, right, there's this great clinking of the motorized handcar that's very
Mhm.
powerful. Sean Baker talks about it on his letterbox, and I love that. It is the most hypnotic part of the movie, and it sends you perfectly into the zone. Um, and to interweave now my take on it is my metaphor is that it's a trip. It's a long trip. I think it is a perfect encapsulation of all the phases you go through. And that makes it perfect because, especially in ancient, rituals in which you would enter into an altered state of mind, you would start with a percussive or rhythmic element, right? And they get on this mechanical handcar and it's so yeah, definitely saw that. So
Cool.
all those elements there.
Let's rewind a little bit and get into some of the synopsis, background of this film. And did you get a chance to watch the Shudder episode on cursed films?
I read about it, but I did not get to see it.
Okay, no problem. I'll fill you in. All right. So thanks to Wiki, we have this brisk synopsis. Stalker is from 1979, Soviet science fiction art film from Andrei Tarkovsky, with a screenplay written by Arkady and Boris Strugatsky. It's loosely based on their 1972 novel Roadside Picnic. The film combines elements of science fiction with dramatic philosophical, psychological, and theological themes, for sure. The film tells the story of an expedition led by a figure known as the Stalker, who takes his two clients, a melancholic writer seeking inspiration and the professor seeking scientific discovery, to a mysterious, restricted site known simply as the Zone, where there supposedly exists a room which grants a person's innermost desires. Got a few, I do factoids on this show, so let's dive in a few of those. The Zone was filmed, or the zone of the film was inspired by the Chelyabinsk incident in 1957, according to IMDb. Several hundred square kilometers were polluted by fallout and abandoned. And then obviously Chernobyl. A lot of people see this as what's the word? Foreseeing the future of that disaster. Here's the really trippy stuff. So the film contains 142 shots within 163 minutes, so a lot of long takes. They initially shot it on this thing called Kodak 5247 stock, and apparently they got it back to the Soviet laboratories, and it was all discolored and stuff. When you're kind of reading through the lines here, though, I have a feeling that Tarkovsky really wasn't getting on with this cinematographer, and I kind of have a feeling there's some sabotage, but I mean, can't say for sure. The Criterion booklet has a lot of interesting facts, and there's a guy named Cinema Tyler on YouTube that goes into a lot of these details about how like they shot it a few different times, and the first time they had all these tanks, and then by the last time they filmed it, they had like half as many tanks as what they started. So a lot of crazy stuff. Any thoughts so far?
No, this is all great. I'm with you. If you have more, keep going.
All right. In the film, a stalker is a professional guide to the zone, and now you can actually meet stalkers that take people on illegal tours into Chernobyl. And you have one of the Shutter movie essentially mostly follows this guy that lives in the area where they filmed it, and so he's like a big film buff on it, and likes to say, "Hey, this is where that shot was, and this shot was," and he's an enthusiast. Um, did you notice the AT symbol that was on the motorcycle helmet and the pack of cigarette at the end?
I did not. No, it wasn't so focused on
Yep,
those.
no problem. The AT, Andrei Tarkovsky. So a little Easter egg there, even from the master.
I like that.
Um, the shooting location in Tall Inn was really unhealthy. And yeah, a lot of the cast got exposed to a lot of bad radiation and led to Tarkovsky's premature death. I think he was only in his 50s, I think.
Yeah, I did read that there's theories that he was also poisoned by the Russian KGB. That's probably far out, but that was one blog. So yeah,
Hmm.
I think this is more likely that they hung out for too long in a radioactive zone. So I believe that that's all what that Shutter curse was highly about, right? Was everyone kind of being infected by the radiation after this film, and it's sort of having a creepy parallel to the themes of the movie itself.
I think, I mean, it doesn't directly focus on that. It just kind of talks about all the kind of the quirky nuances, which that being one of the major ones and kind of a chilling one. So it definitely falls into that series. Stalker, I didn't know about this, was actually a common nickname for men who engaged in illegal enterprise of prospecting and smuggling alien artifacts out of the zone. So
Yeah,
different
and
nuclear sites.
I'm gonna actually
Mhm.
butt in right there because I looked it up because I was actually interested. I would just put it soccer definition and went on the whole very rote, perfunctory Webster's deep dive, and then I finally found stuff that was very very relevant. And yes, in English terms, right, a stalker is someone who like follows a woman too much, a person who hunts game stealthily, right? But in Russia, this word was coined by the Strugatsky brothers in a novel called Roadside Picnic, and this is a 1972 novel. And this novel is actually an allusion to Rudyard Kipling's character Stocky from Stocky and Company. So there's this funny back and forth between like American texts and Russian texts here going on, but that's a little relevant. They coined it, right? And it's what you said. It's a nickname for men engaged in the illegal trade of prospecting and smuggling alien artifacts from a zone. So he's definitely making an allusion to that by calling this stalker. It's called capital Z zone. So I found that really interesting. And now today, there's even a Russian term. It's Cernoble is the term Skij stalker. I don't know how they would pronounce it, you know, with the Russian, you know, pronunciation and phonetics, but it's easily legible. It's a Chernobyl stalker. It's a very common thing to have these guides to the zone today, which, as you said, it's oddly foreboding, or there's this eerie premonition of the future in this in weird ways that it's kind of haunting in that sense. So yeah, sorry to butt in there, but I wanted to
Of
just
course.
add into the etymology of the term because it is like thrown out in the movie and they kind of describe what the stalker's role is, but it's hard to unpack it's good to unpack too the connotations we have as English speakers with this word because it doesn't mean what we think it means.
All right. My last one is the fact that the sepia tone, stops at the 38-minute and 50-second mark when they do officially enter the zone. Very Wizard of Oz style there. And before we jump too much further, I did want to kind of go over my quick history with Tarkovsky.
Sure.
So I didn't really hear about Tark until I got into the Criterion Collection, and there's a lot of chatter on Facebook where you should start because a lot of it's, you know, it's very amped up as these cerebral films that most likely are going to make you fall asleep. I started with The Mirror, which was probably one of the hardest film experiences I had just because I did not know what was going on. And it finally clicked so hard at the end that it instantly made me fall in love with it. His visuals are incredible, a lot of parallels to Kubrick's work. So that's kind of fun to dig into because Kubrick obviously being one of my favorite American directors. From there, I believe I went to, I think, Andrei Rublev, which is his big epic 3 hour medieval mosaic religious painter story. Ivan's Childhood is in there. Really enjoy that. That probably has my favorite visuals of all the Tarkovsky films. Um, I've seen one of his shorts about the violin boy, Solaris. I really need to revisit that one. Um, Nostalgia is surprisingly good. And then The Sacrifice is the one that kind of weighed on me the most, kind of the most Bergman-esque, which I wasn't as fond of, but of course, got to get back to it. Hopefully, I'm not missing any of his work there, but that's everything that comes to mind from my his tragically short filmography.
Yeah, and definitely you have a much more thorough and comprehensive understanding of its work, which is going to be fun. I have Nostalgia and The Mirror lined up. I've had them as well, sitting in my vault, my USB vault, for a few years. And so this was the first in that, but now I'm very excited to get into those. For those two, which one would you recommend first?
Ivan's Childhood. It's short, it's visually stunning, simplistic story, very come and see like. So I recommend
Interesting.
Ivan's Childhood.
I haven't even heard of that one. And then so then with Nostalgia and Meet the Mirror, for those two, which would you choose on top next?
Nostalgia is more I would say easy to get into, even though it's kind of challenging in its own right. Yeah.
Cool. I've seen a lot of scenes from it independently, but I haven't, I've seen the images of it, and they're definitely, they sear into the imagination for quite a while, but I've not yet tackled that. Maybe I'll just do both, just knock them all out in the week, so I can really get that feel of him. Because even with this in Solaris, right, the sort of marshy, boggy nature scenes, like Solaris starts with that.
Yep.
I mean, of course, that goes very quickly into sci-fi realms, and interior spaces. But I saw a lot of parallels, and also The Sacrifice. These long takes. He loves darkly lit wooden rooms with amazing complexity and texture. Very rustic.
Yep.
Even like that first shot. Oh no, it's not the first shot. The first shot's in the bar in this, right? The bar, the wood.
Yes.
It's almost like a matte painting. It very
Mhm.
much feels like you're in a museum. And then the second shot of the bed, then the reveal of the family in the bed, but the bed itself, unreal. The sense of beauty, right? There's like a use of dual color grading for the background of the bed. It's extremely ethereal, and it like jumps at you, and it looks like it's also blended in together, so it looks like flat. It's this weird dimensionality, and then the camera then cuts to his tracking shot from the glasses on the table over the family and then back to the glasses, which then move. Very good circular thing. I'm getting really into the weeds here, but yeah, there's a
No problem.
lot of technical virtuosity going here, and meticulousness to his craft. He's a craftsman, no doubt.
Before we get into our notes, just three quick questions on kind of your experience actually watching the movie. So I'll go first. And the first question is, what is your experience like watching this? The first time I saw this was like on a hotel TV. I had my laptop plugged up to it. The subtitles were kind of wonky, but overall I enjoyed it. The second time was on the Criterion Blu-ray, which pretty good too. Every time I've watched this all the way through, surprisingly enough. And then this last time was probably the best, being on my computer right in front of me for me to easily pause and kind of either write out some of my thoughts or look things up. So how did you watch it? And you said you were able to get through it all in one go?
Yeah, format's important. I was able to watch it on my like 50-inch, pretty high def, beautiful image quality. And I only paused it once for like a very, very quick, drink, and that's it. Like brush my teeth and back to it. So super simple, as flawless and smooth and rhythmic as it can be, right? That's okay. Even at the theater, you're gonna run to the restroom once often. So, and it was like a 5-minute pause. So definitely fell into the rhythms of the movie. And I got into very nice quasi hypnotic states. I wasn't like disassociating or anything like that, but I just felt like time slowed a little, and I was nice. Meditative would be a good term too, and was enjoying the methodical slowness of the shots. And yeah, absolutely appreciated its pacing as an antidote to a lot of the films I've seen recently.
What stood out most to you? Set design for me. I thought that every inch of this is covered in some pretty amazing lived in kind of feeling set design, and the brisk pacing.
That's a good one. Set design is very strong. I loved the sense of pragmatism to the filmmaking. I mean, there's not too many shots, as you noted, there's not too many scenes. And he really creates a very mythological story. There's like a sort of hero's journey that goes on with different milieus that give you very different visual and aesthetic feels, and also different psychological and emotional backdrops for these characters and their journey. So he tells a lot through image to complement the at times nonstop dialogue, right? There's moments, long periods, long interludes without any dialogue as well. But when they start talking, you got to keep up because it's coming fast, and it's not like everyday banal conversation. They're getting
Right.
into the thicket of existential grappling. So yeah, definitely that sort of duality is what stood out to me: the dialogue and the methodical, mythological cinematography.
Nice. And finally, what surprised you most? For me, it's just how much the religious theming really gushes from what we get here. So I'm excited to talk about that.
Yeah, what surprised me was how much more approachable it was than The Sacrifice or even Solaris to me.
Okay.
And I was expecting something that was much more mysterious by the end, actually, from what I had heard about it. And I felt like he kind of leaves a lot out there for you to take. It's not like he's laconic or keeping his thoughts and ideas to himself. They're laid bare before you. So it's really just about trying to map it all out in a way that's cohesive. So yeah, that's what stood out to me.
Cool. Let's dive into some notes. My first one is, man, the stalker and the guy who plays the writer look scary, similar to me. The guy who plays the writer is actually plays Andrei Rublev in that film, so I'm already familiar with him big time. So yeah, it kind of throws me off at first seeing the one guy, and then the actual writer comes in and you're like, oh, okay, these are two different guys. And the guy who plays the professor looks much different. And then what is up with the patchiness on the stalker's hair? Like, I think there's like a blonde spot on his head. Very bizarre stuff.
Love the blonde spot. Definitely almost like a feature or a costume tick you would see on like a sci-fi, like Fifth Element character. So that worked for me.
Mhm.
I believe that by the end, the doppelganger aspects of the three characters are definitely not, right. They're different, especially the third one who's balding, works. And I'll get into that probably a little bit more later, but it also bugged me a bit. I felt like they were too indecipherable visually. And so the casting was a bit tricky. I mean, and even their professions are very similar, right? In ways. They're all like male, white, middle-aged intellectuals to a degree, right? A physicist, you
Mhm.
know, uh, a professor, writer, the stalker, they're all hunting, questing after truth in different formats. And so it definitely felt like it had not a monotone energy, but it was very isolated, right? I mean, we have an early scene, a histrionic scene of the wife throwing a hysterical fit and sprawling out on the floor, which I think was over dramatic. I actually did not like it. I'm not going to try to like be charitable because it's an old film. I thought that the acting was a little bad, and I definitely don't think that was his strong point. Um, but then I really missed the feminine energy as the film went on. But then I think that's what this is. I think I saw all the characters by the end, to try to be brief, as kind of ciphers for Tarkovsky's psyche and all of his, like, you can put it in any trinity you want, like his id, super ego, that's boring, or reason, faith, the synthesis of the two. And it feels like the stalker's kind of the interloper, and the two figures are, the dualities that are he's trying to kind of synthesize between. So it works. It's very much, to me, that's how it works. It's very much an analogy for those forces and thoughts. So it's a very internal movie to me. It's a very cognitive movie, and odd comparison. I thought of it as like the Phantom Toll Booth, which is, have you seen the Phantom Toll Booth or know about the story?
That's an animated film?
Yeah, and it's a kid's story, and it's very mythological, but it's playing with philosophical ideas, kind of like Alice in Wonderland. I mean, oddly enough, I don't think this is that far off from Alice in Wonderland, let's say. But I would say this is more personal, and more esoteric in a good way. I like the esotericism of it. So yeah, that's my initial notes on the doppelganger aspects and how it kind of plays with some of the metaphors and themes of the film.
My response to that, something I didn't think of at beginning. You had mentioned about the wife kind of writhing around in the on the floor, and there's this swelling music, and it's very bombastic feeling. It's almost like throughout the first half hour, Tark kind of had his hands tied to tell a more narrative thing going on, because we have like the room with a motorcycle where the guy's looking for him, and you got the gunshots. It's very more of a movie that it's a more of a movie that we're used to seeing. I mean, not so much, because I mean, you have these extremely long takes, but there are these little nuggets in there that you kind of do latch on to, like, oh, they're trying to get to the train track, so they got to get around these guards and get around this shooting and so forth. So I kind of felt like he did break down a little bit and did some more conventional things just to get his audience maybe acclimated.
Absolutely. Yeah. It starts off, very orthodox in those rights, right? You have a family drama, right? You have a husband-wife dynamic. You have the wife who doesn't want the husband to go venture out into the world and risk, his well-being and, risk the family's welfare. Then you have, it's not a heist, but you have an adventure dynamic of them eluding, the Russian forces. And, you have that sort of, chase, but it's not really quite a chase because they're always hiding, right? But you have that element. They're being stealthy, crafty, and yeah, it's playing with very mainstream orthodox genre tropes on those two elements there, to set up this stage. So yeah, I appreciated that. I mean, there's that shot where they're in a smoky alley in their little car, and they all jump out and hide from one of the roving motorbike cops. It reminded me so much of 1983's Endgame, which we just did, which is in New York, but just like these films where, these roving bands of people are trying to hide from, the state forces. So yeah, I agree with you there 100%.
A fun little Easter egg in the Shutter documentary is if you look really, really closely, there's a smokestack next to the big gate where all the soldiers are at, and there's UN painted on the smokestack. So that's a very minor detail to pick up on. I wanted to go back to the opening scene. Yeah, the sepia bar shot is very stunning. Very definitely pops out at you, portrait-esque. But more so the Eastern style of the music is very creepy. And the more I think about it now, it kind of makes me think of more like Middle Eastern kind of sounds that you would hear connected to something more of a mysterious religious kind of context. And then, yeah, the sepia tone with the yellow text of the opening credits, very interesting and bold choice.
Yeah, I fixated on the sound design. I thought it was very meticulous. I love the droney kind of experimental stuff too, like quasi electronic. It felt very like proto Johnny Greenwood. I mean, not so bombastic as him, but it, or no, I would say more than Greenwood. It was very Trent Reznor. These industrial tones as well, but also a very silent movie, right? Um, so I really latched onto that, and also noticed that uh, never was there like real melodic sounds for the most part. It was always very dissonant, and which is
Mhm.
interesting because they have one dialogue, one of my favorites, when they're talking about the unselfishness of art. And they talk about how music is this thing that kind of stands apart from ideas. And it's a very intellectual film. It's very much a film about epistemology, about the quest for truth in the idea form, right? And they talk about how music is this thing of sheer sound and it's free from ideas, right? And noise somehow has this capacity to bring harmony that stuns us and brings us together. Um, and I thought it was intriguing, though, that he never really shows too much harmony in the film. Um, Almost a missed possibility there. Like I would say, like for him to maybe throw on top of the rail car noises at the very end with the shot of the daughter, um, throwing this like really harmonious, I don't know. Oh, he does. He throws the classical music on there. Maybe he does do it that I'm not even
Oh, the
realizing
joy,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There you go. There you go. So um, I
And
stand
going
corrected.
back to what you said earlier about the train, now in the opening shot, there's kind of an overhead of a table, and I think you see some water on there, and apples, and cotton, needle pills, that kind of stuff. There is a little rattle that does move a glass, and it almost foreshadows what we're going to get from Monkey towards the end. The other thing I wanted to mention is, yeah, I definitely felt like the sound design kind of cranked up here, like especially, I mean, like the sound of the motorcycle, it really penetrates what you're looking at. And then a lot of people say they fall asleep through Tark movies. I don't really see it could. I mean, there's so much great stuff to look at. I mean, even that real slow scene at the beginning where they're introducing the main characters. I mean, you look at the back wall and it's so textured, and it almost looks like there's faces on it and stuff. There's so much to look at. I think that's probably the reason I connect so well with Tarkovsky, since I'm such a visual film consumer.
Yeah, if you appreciate painterly images, and you could sit there with the painterliness, right, and not stand, but enjoy a static shot and yourself be active, you bring the kinetic perceptile energy, you'll love a Tark film, right? But if you need to be bombarded with uh,
Exposition.
exposition, but he has a lot of that, right? So that's not so much the problem, but he has lulls, right? He has lulls and interludes, what are I think are necessary to digest the manic, free for all of his, existential exposition, right? But if you also need, kinetic cuts, right? You talked early when you're bringing your snippets and notes at the beginning to our audience's awareness of how there was, I think we said only 142 shots in 160 some minute movie, right? It says it all, right? I think the average amount of shots per movie is at least uh, 3 to 1, at least probably 4, 5, 6 to 1. I mean, Ambulance, I just saw a Michael Bay film that had to have had like a few thousand shots for hundreds, I mean, 16 shots per minute at least.
Yeah.
So it's definitely about how we're not attuned to that, but it's possible to be attuned to it. You just have to retrain yourself really as a viewer.
It's kind of ridiculous how well he paints the scope of this utter wasteland that they are living in. Squalor. I mean, everything looks absolutely filthy. Um, and yeah, just throughout it, I just marvel at how well. I mean, even like the sewer tunnel. I mean, there's these buildups of whatever on the ground, and you're like, I wonder what that is. And just so much to look at and so much to consider, you know. And I think that actually plays in thematically later on. I'll get into how the fact that this is lived in does aid to what happens in the story.
Yeah, I mean, in each setting too is very distinct. That was kind of my review on Letterbox. Was like you have the meadows. If you run with my theory that this is all a trip, right? The meadows early on when you're in that like initial euphoria, that kind of high. Um, and it subtly segues into this like sort of watery place when you start to get into an intrepid dynamic, and then you sort of waffle or equivocate on how to proceed. Do I go forward? Do I go back? You start to enter these like mind games with yourself, and then you have these tunnels where you start to get more claustrophobic and bleak and paranoid. Then you end up in this dilapidated warehouse where you're in a very like nihilistic state and almost on the brink of despair, questioning the meaning of existence and so forth. So definitely, in that sense, like there's another film like that that really I felt beautifully worked in terms of visual mythologizing. And that's last year. I'm going to always probably botch the year, but 1917, Sam Mendes's war film. It might be 1913, whatever the year
17.
was. 17, great. I got it right the first time. But that film is very beautifully done in successive stages, right? And each stage really feels imagistically like a moodscape, right? And the moodscapes work one after another, like this painting in motion, like this hero's journey in motion on a color grade level, on a visual level as well, that reflects the other levels of storytelling going on. And I feel like this also works in that way. And then we have the circularity, right, with the bar, with, as you said, the sepia tone bar. It starts off the film, it returns to it. We don't return to the, we do return to the bed, but a different angle at the end, right? And our stalker is now being tended to by his wife. He's sweating. He looks like he's very sickly, which also works with the whole, to me, cursed element of this movie. It's also this eerie foreboding, almost on a superstitious, supernatural level, because I really felt like the stalker was Tark's main cipher. Like I feel like that was him. They all work for him though, right? Because one even starts to talk about critics and so forth in it. I forget if that was the professor or the writer. I'm guessing it's probably the writer. And I was almost laughing because critics hate that stuff today when it becomes like very didactic and very self-referential. When, let's say, Malcolm and Marie, right? When Levinson very obviously starts to bring in real life film discourse into his movie to make a point. I felt like Tark was doing that there, very much so. And he was basically saying like they just want content, right? The character, but it's obviously Tark kind of ranting to me. So that was a bit of a fascinating moment as well. But yeah, I definitely saw this movie in phases, though, in distinct phases, and the color palette works. It's so nicely done, but obvious that anything in the zone was color, anything outside of the zone was sepia tone. The only thing, right?
Monkey. Except for Monkey.
Yes, that makes sense though, right? Because it's sort of outside of the realm of rationality. Also the daughter, right? They're back in the sepia tone world, and then we have a shot of the daughter. The daughter's in color, right? Because the daughter is a breach. She's a glitch. And in the best way, right? She's a miracle in a way, right? She's a liberation from the shackles and fetters of logic, of the triangle, right? I love that they kept using triangle, the physicist, right, as his like, or was that the writer complaining about the physicists and science? Probably was. I don't know. Either one. Triangle is brought up again and again as this like form of mathematical confinement as well, right? It's like it does stuff for us, right? It helps, it builds cities, technology, infrastructure, the bedrock of civilization. Yet it's also a trap on a moral, spiritual level, right? So I love the fact that it was the triangle they use, and let's say not a square or a rectangle, because the film is about trinities, right? There's three main characters. The trinities are all over the place. So that's probably getting into you, and I'll probably pass it off if you want to talk. It doesn't have to be about triangles or trinities, but the sort of spiritual elements in it, because they're there. And I saw that refracted in that metaphor for sure.
I think it's hilarious when we first meet the writer. He's talking about how bored he is and how like supernatural things aren't possible and stuff. And that's a nice, perfect setup. So you buy into this idea that maybe they were just kind of drinking at the bar the whole time, and maybe they had something laced in their drinks.
Oh no, I wasn't actually taking it like that. I was
Okay.
just seeing it as a thinly veiled allegory for a trip. I mean, I was wondering, right? Because Tarkovsky definitely goes in that space. I mean, he could just be a philosopher, which they enter the same space without the need for chemical supplements, right? But I was wondering, like, if you'd ever experienced, an altered state by any chance, and how that might have informed the film, because it does really go through all the ebbs and flows of a psychedelic experience, very writ large, and yeah, I don't think it's only that, right? I think it's also obviously I saw at the beginning, oh, the zone, it's such a grandiose, all-encompassing metaphor that it's going to be one of those films that everyone's going to project what they have into it, and that's the point almost. That's the space, right? It's like everyone's projection becomes reality. So that was just one very legible projection that I rolled with, right? I kind of like, ooh, it teased out that one. But you could tease out anything or a lot of stuff from this.
Have you watched much or any Bellatar?
Yes, I've seen the Turin horse.
Okay.
You'd have to list all the rest, but I know I've seen the Turin horse. Gorgeous, beautiful. That's one though, and I know you love it. I remember reading your review. Beautiful film, stunningly beautiful. That I would never probably watch again, but I loved. So that would be a perfect answer to that. That's one of those where it was just painstakingly slow, and I know why that's a bad take and why I'm untrained, but that's what it was for me on a visceral level.
I saw a lot of similarities here, like especially that
Mhm.
scene where Stalker's going into the room next to the bedroom and he turns on some kind of furnace thing and it just kind of watches him doing his thing and just, it's kind of sitting still, letting it play out. Definitely got some Bellatar vibes
Oh,
I wanted to throw out there.
gorgeous, gorgeous. And the turn horse, absolutely gorgeous. Oh my gosh. The sound design too, the wind in that film,
Very, very
like
dreadful.
chills. I mean, unreal. I just don't know if I need to. I'll maybe go back to maybe with a group, it'd be fun just to see others' reactions and like see them anguish and squirm and work their way through it and find the value of it slowly, right? Because a lot of these things they creep up on you. You have all your anxieties, all your impatience speaking in your mind, right? Grating um, abrasively on a visceral level. And then it's like you have to sink into it, or even if you don't sink into it after, you're like, wow, that was something. Like I did get through it, even if I was a little erratic, right? I still got through that experience. And oddly, sometimes it could transform you like long after it, which is weird. I've seen some films, right, where it's like almost demands a meditative state. I never got there at all. I was completely scattered. And then weeks later, like when it'll come, like the film will hit, right? It's very odd. And like maybe I'll reach that space and like I'll imagine the movie again, like a Tark film or a Bellatar film, and they will work with a delay, this weird delay. And those experiences are awesome. So yeah.
It kind of goes without saying that his shot composition is next level. I love seeing the parallels between him and Kubrick. They love trucking to the side where like what's going on is obscured by like a wall or something. And there's a really cool shot in here where it shows the stalker kind of walking in a warehouse and then it trucks to the side and then zooms in and it's like it ends on his face. It's just such masterful direction with the camera. And I wanted to read a quote here that might fuel some interesting debate. My conscience wants vegetarianism to win over the world, and my subconscious is yearning for a piece of juicy meat. But what do I want? Yeah, with that great debate between what's right and what your desire is, right?
Yeah, the moral imperative, right? The superego versus the id, the primal self, the urge, the impulsive. It reminded me so much of my college journals, which this film really felt like a sort of like writ large, my musings in those journals. And what I loved that because it felt very freeing. It was like, oh, I could have actually done what I like sometimes imagine doing, just like throwing it all out there with these characters kind of just ricocheting these ideas back and forth. Um, and that's where, because it's so close to me and I do appreciate it, um, I do think that I want to be equally critical. And I really appreciate like this movie, but like it really does feel like not superfluous, but it really feels narcissistic, which is a central theme too. It really feels like Tark exercising his ideas in characters that aren't fully realized to me. I really feel like it's all ideas.
Archetypal.
Yes, it's all archetypal and it's all ideas, and the archetypes are new and novel and fresh and so much more intricate and complex than your normal archetypes that I absolutely adore them. and I'll definitely tout them to much, right? And like I took a class in college as well that was existentialism in lit and film, and that was with Dreyfus, who is a Dostoevsky and Heidegger scholar. Dostoevsky perfect because it's very Dostoevsky-esque at times, this film. And in that class, we did The Third Man. We did some Terrence Malick. We did Hiroshima Mon Amour. I just kept watching this. I was like, this would have been the absolutely perfect film for that class. It's one of the greatest existentialist films of all time. But it's that. And so it's very existential. It's very much like Bergman's the one where they're playing chess, even Wild Strawberry. Yeah, yes. It's very much like those films, which I absolutely adore. I now, maybe because I'm trying to like expand my own horizons, am trying to be critical of what's very close to me and see like where is it limited? What's its limited sense, right? Because it's very expansive in its idea form, and I feel like it is very limited in its archetypes. There is no feminine real energy. I feel like the wife's she's better at the end. She's a little better at the end where she talks about her bitter happiness over a life without love or whatever. I love that line. So she has some moments at the end, but I mean, there is no feminine energy here at all.
It kind of falls into gender stereotypes where the woman is more concerned about the domestic issues, where the husband is more high-minded with his, thoughts about, what he has to do in the world. How is he going to make an impact?
So well done. Yeah, exactly. I mean, so well said. I agree. It definitely falls into that old dualism, that dichotomy, which is a little redundant, but whatever. It's not unbelievable. It works for the film. There's a lot of poetry thrown in here too, right?
Very genuine.
Yeah, genuine. Yeah. The daughter element is fun. I really love the last shot, that whole supernatural infusion into the text. People were noting, and I didn't really catch these so much. I guess I wasn't paying detailed enough, but that there was a lot of little supernatural moments when they were in the zone, like things suddenly disappearing. Did you notice like a bird suddenly disappear and so forth? Or did you notice anything else?
In the sand room, I saw some weird bird action.
Mm-hmm. There was a lot of anomalies that some people pointed out that I guess I wasn't having that level of a microscopic viewing. I was not. It's a very broad viewing for me, because I was, even after some of these heavy bits of exposition, I found myself still chewing on them so much that it was diluting some other areas of my experience with the film, if that makes any sense. So it definitely is a worthy of revisiting, and an easy one. I would revisit this easily.
I mean, I'm a little disappointed in my original review of this, because I think it was fairly brief and started off with just saying, man, this is an existential feast, which is correct, but it really is more of a just broad perception of what it was that I watched, instead of really digging into it, which I had the great privilege of doing that this time. I wanted to go back to the trance state. So you had mentioned earlier where the ka-ching, 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 ka-ching is the perfect thing to kind of lull you into this trance. And you're also zoomed right up on the back of people's heads. I mean, of course, your mind is going to wander. And between the sound design there and just staring at a head, and then all of a sudden it snaps into color. Pretty cool stuff.
I love it. That's the strongest part of the film. It's a very loud and notable gimmick, I'll call it. Not, it's gimmick's the wrong word, but device that he's using with the sound shift. We've seen it quite a lot. with the sound design, but it absolutely works. The space, right? The moving from the industrial to the nature, right? On this little motorized hand car, uh, beautifully rendered. I love that you point out the close-ups of the heads. All three perspectives we get, the camera slowly rotates from each perspective, and that noise design, perfect, perfect, perfect.
At this point, they start introducing this character of Porcupine and saying, I guess what his tragic flaw was, I think he brought his brother to the zone in order to help them, but he ended up just coming away with a fortune or something. And I think he was essentially that made him depressed, that his, I guess, true desire was just financial gain instead of caring for people. And we get into that with our main stalker later on as well, with his main goal for what he does. And I'll go ahead and drop the fact that the more I watched, the more I saw the parallel between what a stalker is and what a pastor or a priest is in terms of bringing people towards religion, and are they going to take the plunge and believe or not? So
Yeah.
we'll get there.
No, and it's also the same as an author, right? An auteur, someone who's the guide, and someone who there's a great line, also a writer, right? The writer does the same in a way. The scientist does the same. They all do the same in their own modes, in their own domains. I think that's what he's kind of getting at as well. One of the characters, that's one of the problems. I felt like they very much conflated in the film because they do look alike. It all is so fast. And I wasn't, I guess, doing a close enough reading of the film. I wasn't actively
Apologies necessary.
yeah, but what's the truth? But one of them was saying that they started off thinking they were going to give this world this gift, right? This like gift of wisdom, but really all that happened was the world shaped them, right? They had to cater and pander to the world.
That.
I mean, how is that not like the tortured artist who becomes defined by what their audience wants, right? I love that too, because it's like just the self-awareness shows that you are trying to still rupture from the expectations and anticipations of what like Heidegger would call the they self, the like public self, the social self, the mores and norms you're expected to produce through your work, and to do something that's really individualized, that's really non-parallel. And so I very much appreciated that. But it's like what you said, right? It's like how do you maintain that and preserve that is a central tension in this film.
One thing, so the war pollution is something that stands out to me. And you had mentioned that they go from like wasteland to nature, where it's more of like a more natural state, but there's still like, very lived in, disheveled kind of feel to it. I mean, you got all these power lines that are kind of hanging this way and that, kind of in this crucifix kind of look. I recalled, I listened to a whole video essay from Renegade Cut on the religious aspects of this film. I wouldn't say that I'm carrying on that opinion too highly, but it definitely keyed me into some things to look for here. They're very skeptical of the stalker's process of throwing these little nuts and figuring out what's safe. It seems very ridiculous at first. And I think his quote is, he demands discipline because it is so unpredictable, and there is no direct path. All really interesting analogies to why religion and faith is so complicated. There aren't direct answers. You really have to feel out the process and come closer to your religion and so forth. So a lot of interesting religious parallels throughout. And then I guess the only real, there's a few instances of some surrealism, like the writer goes and wants to walk right up into the room and he's just like, well, you guys called me back. And like, no, we didn't. And then later on, I think what the professor goes back to get his rucksack, which has the bomb in it. And then they just wander back into him. He's like, how'd you get in front of us? Like, no, I went behind you. So kind of playing with your mind. And for some reason, I got a kick out of the fact that when they do enter the tunnel, they call it the dry tunnel, but it's totally like water flowing and they're going to have to swim across it.
That is interesting too. Yeah. Definitely also existential, right? You can take it that realm as well. where they are almost seeking enlightenment, right? And they have their guide to reach enlightenment. And I really love this stage where they get to quote unquote enlightenment, right? And then you get really these really dark forces, and they talk about enlightenment as this like sort of precipice where the ego is stripped away and the self gets to like see itself in unguarded purity, or like not quite, I don't think they use the word purity, but like sort of an unsheathed interiority that's terrifying. And then you get this figure that like suddenly has a bomb and wants to blow things up. That didn't really feel believable, but it worked on a level of like he had this destructive impulse because like he'd seen the core and there was like nothingness at bottom. You could take that other ways too. I think that he was trying to say that like people, I don't know, he think he took this like very arrogant and aloof, and which is a danger of clarity, right? Like the ego inflates. So I appreciate that all as well. And the soccer is definitely a guide, right? But also takes me back to like sort of the mystical experience, right? The traditional mystical experience, you have a guide who knows the danger. And I love the talk of like, we're entering this space. It's very capricious. You know, every step of the way, like there's this like dynamic of do you go forward or do you go back? There's like a temporal tension. There's a metaphysical tension. There's multiple tensions going on. There's tensions of logic. There's tensions of enchantment, right? And the miraculous interposing themselves on each of these spaces. And all of their memories are being, interwoven. And I love like one moment, I think like probably the closest someone gets to summating, like, I think true enlightenment is like all of your memories splayed out before you. And I think they like even spoke about how there's like a process of remembering breeds and fosters gentleness, which I absolutely adored. That was a really interesting phenomenological take. And I only mean that in the sense it's a really weird loaded term, but it's just this like philosophical inquiry or pursuit to see how ways of being, ways of thinking, ways of doing something, let's say like eating spaghetti, how that affects the way your mood is, the way your emotional comportment is, right? And so I like the idea of like when you sit and reflect, right, you become a gentler human, or you tend to. There's like a sort of there's a relation
Kinder,
there.
I think. I
Yeah,
think they used
yeah,
the term kinder at one point.
kinder. That's probably a better term, right? Um, but yes, it was so Heideggerian for me. I've read a text called Being a Time in Full. It took me a year. And that's really all about like seeing this ecstatic vision, which is only achieved by entering a state of groundlessness, right? A state of absolute like uncertainty, you would say. And you can only reach it by seeing it your utmost finality, your death, by confronting your death, your endpoint, and being thrown from your birth, right? So you have this like your whole life splayed out, and then it all collapses on the present moment, and you have this ecstatic emergence of truth. They definitely are reaching after that in this. They're grasping after that in this. So I love this. You have the same ideas. You're working on the same plane.
Sweet.
That's what I was getting at, right? There's so many different models, right? Spiritual, intellectual models that really, and templates and frameworks that can be easily transposed onto this text, and they work. It's a very timeless classical structure on that level.
All the shots of water, just painting closely to see all this stuff, just slightly submerged. Not only is it beautiful and really cool to see, but I mean, if you really could consider what they're showing a tiled floor, a needle, a gun. I think there's some gold at one point, very material possessions, things that people have let, consume them and then fall by the wayside. And yet they're still on this quest for enlightenment. I think that's the best probably way to phrase it, to be more non secular.
No, perfect. But you don't have to. Yeah, I agree with that. Right, stripping the material. It's very much in the New Testament, right? They're
I,
all
I
yeah.
I loved how they talked about the value they placed in themselves, and these weren't good people, these weren't bad people, these were unhappy people looking to be more filled. There's this whole conversation about art versus human survival. Where do we put? I mean, I think the writer actually says like the importance of life is creating art, and I think another one steps in is like, well, human survival's a big one too. So I enjoyed that debate, and I think I'll end. Not all my notes, but my final statement here. It's so depressing. Did you happen to notice that they're panning across the water and that shows like a container full of fish in water, within water? So they're like trapped within their little
I love that.
environment. That was
No,
so like kind of depressing for those little guys.
yeah, and what a great metaphor for like being entrapped in your environment, in your logic domain, when
Mhm.
there's essentially another cosmos. It's kind of string theory-esque in a way that really opens up a level of reflection. That's what I was saying that Marvel doesn't do, right? Just that one image, right, is better than the multiverse to me. The multiverse for
Just
them, yeah, is a narrative trick for them to cross product placement. It's just like, oh, we're gonna bring all these characters in each other, so you got to watch every single thing. That's all it is for the most part.
so the devil's advocate perspective on this is
Yeah,
growing up as a comic book movie fan in the 2000s, we would get these Spider-Man movies and they would be great in their own right, but we would get like Spider-Man and one villain. And we kept seeing the Green Goblin come back again and again. And I was thirsting for variety because I really craved like the days of watching like Saturday morning cartoon shows where we had this plethora of villains coming at Spider-Man. So to enter this multiverse and to remove these barriers and just to throw everything at our hero and push him to its limits, I personally find really entertaining. But it's really interesting hearing some of the story structural gimmickry of it as well
yeah,
that you kind of
no, that's fair.
went
That's fair
into.
defense. I mean, that's a target audience, right? A comic book fan that already loves it. I'm the wrong audience, so I'm just bitching in a void, right? Because it's not for me. But like, I was on board. That's my thing. So maybe what I should sort of tone down my I feel like it's almost a parody of itself, my anti-Marvel rhetoric, which I haven't been much ever until more recently, because I want them to tone it down. Is that I just wish they would do less of it. I don't think they don't need to take it away. Just like bring in a new bad guy into this movie. Like that's why I think the Spider-Man worked. They brought back a few of the Spider-Mans, a few of the bad guys, added some elements. But when you have these movies, I thought there's
And
a lot
it
of great
totally
things.
elevated with Green Goblin. William Defoe's Green Goblin in that movie was on another level, I thought.
Yeah, no, he was he
That
they
that
did.
apartment battle where they're like
Mhm.
fighting and going through the building level by level,
They,
very
he,
intense.
they added a lot to his character, not so much to Ray Charles. He played Ray Charles, the famous Jamie Foxx's bad guy character. He was kind of just pretty empty in it. But and the other bad guy too, Molina was a little better. He was in between. But that's just time constraints on films too. I just don't do too much with these things. Don't like have to bog us down with 20 minutes of like explaining uh I don't know. There's these moments of Doctor Strange. There's just a snore fest of like trying to tie everything together for us to me. And like it really, I think, repressed. Not Raimi actually got to indulge a lot of his like Raimiisms, right? I mean, he had a lot of fun, and they let him,
Yeah.
I think, fly his freak flag high, as I wrote in my review. Um, but I think that they kind of made a contract or an agreement. Okay, we gotta keep it up with our multiverse, this grand narrative we're constructing. And unfortunately, I think that undermined a little bit of his film, or a lot of it actually. But because if you think about the Spider-Mans, how good those were. You care about Peter Parker really by the end. You care about Aunt May by the end of the Raimi ones I'm talking about, right? There's just so much going on in Doctor Strange that it just was like, ugh. And then they like have all the X-Men in there, which are theater loved. I get it if you love that type of thing. But it's just like, anyways, I'm just boring now. But no, let's go back to
Stalker.
Stalker. Yeah, let's go back to
One
Stalker. Yeah.
And the
Go ahead.
last thing I wanted to say, going back to the stuff in the water, we do see a picture of Jesus at one point, and it's more of an iconography of Jesus.
Hmm.
So in a way that is materialism as religion. So I think it still qualifies as part of that. So
That's very important. Yeah. Do you know if Tark was he Christian? Was he
oh, he's
in?
deeply religious, yeah,
Mhm.
and
So in
Russian Orthodox.
Orthodox, yeah, that makes sense. And that would make your take much more approximate than mine, I would say. I think they both could work, but yes, I would say mine is more of a stretch for that reason on a like, no, on a biographical level, at least, right? Um, but yeah, I thought that um, for anyone listening, check this out. There's a lot we weren't able to cover. Like they have a really interesting stuff about like one guy tries to bring in some instruments to like uh the scientist tries to bring in a soul meter or a manometer or I don't know, a nanometer, and they were really briding him because like it was in his knapsack, and that's why he constantly wants to go back to get his knapsack. Was he
You're
wanted he
talking about the
wanted
bomb?
No, this is before the bomb. He wanted to document his experience. I don't know if you caught that because there's so much in this,
Mm-mm.
right? And
Oh, weird.
so I love that element because it's the will of the scientist, right? The science archetype to capture and catalog and code, and they really get at how detrimental that is, and like to peddle too, to commercialize it, right? To sort of um, find meaning and then encapsulate it, suffocate it, kill it, and share it, kind of. And there's that element of it too, of the futility of that. And I love their actual cynicism towards him for even thinking of bringing that into the zone. Um, and their shaming of him, little mighty hoity-toity, kind of like I was being towards Marvel a second ago, but it was warranted, and I appreciate those themes, the themes of you know elevating and exalting what is beyond the scope of the real, uh, in a very realistic way. Uh, is highly refreshing, and that's what I think this film does very, very well. It makes you reconsider your own dimensions, the spaces you're not existing in, the possibilities that are just outside the scope of your intellectual or cognitive framework or telos. And so I think you can really take a lot personally from a movie like this and grow from, um, as an individual. Um, and so yeah, there's so much here. I love that you pointed out all the water stuff. Do you think the syringe on the table in the beginning, the syringe and the water have anything going on together?
Just the materialistic focus on drugs, was kind of my intuition.
Nice. Yeah. I also noticed that there was a shot of seaweed, right? This is a super stretch. I don't know if it was seaweed, but it's something that to me it looked like unspooled film. I really saw unspooled film, like a real film, um, which I thought maybe was a little wink at his trade, Tark's trade. So
I still have a ton of notes here, so I'm going to run
go ahead.
through these.
Yeah.
And anytime you want to jump in, feel free. I wanted to mention all the blank stares at the camera throughout. A lot of our quiet moments are the blank stares. A lot of fear and caution, wanting to go into the zone, in the unknown, and then they actually say that they have to go it alone. The dripping tunnel, like going back to what you were saying earlier about minimalism, like a lot of this movie feels like they found this perfect lived-in location and said, okay, let's fill it with our movie. And like going out into like the woods and going through some like sewers and stuff feels like something like you and your friends could go do as kids. So it's very relatable in that essence. Yes, very strange, lived in places. We get to the sand room, which is by far my favorite shot of the movie. And even watching it now, and getting that Middle Eastern kind of Russian-y music again, I can kind of see where, and I think at one part he says wandering Jew. And it instantly makes me think of, after they escaped Egypt or whatever, they were wandering through the desert or whatever. So I might be reaching a little bit with my religious metaphors, but I mean, that's kind of what this movie invites you to do, right? Someone has to go first and make the wrong turn. Gosh, they paint like the perfect picture of like a hopeless situation where, what are you going to go back to? Go and get arrested and commit suicide in prison? Pretty bleak stuff. And then, but the writer puts on the Jesus crown and says, "I don't forgive you." Very,
Very
very good
religious.
stuff.
Yeah.
Let's see. You have anything while I kind of
Yeah. I mean, those are all
gather my
great
next batch of
things. Yeah. I
thoughts?
mean, those are almost note for note a lot of my notes that I didn't already go over, but they're all there.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that there's a really interesting part about time, right? Where he says that the future is just a continuation of the present. It's just like this weird idea of time as interconnected and all both separate and one, uniform and distinct, that works with a lot of the themes that are playing in the film. I also really love when the writer, as the he, is complaining about. I think it's the critics, right, who want content, and he says they just want to always find the most like maximum value, or to get as much as they possibly can from every emotional moment. Nobody believes nobody. And I don't know exactly. I'll just paraphrase some of the things he's saying at this moment too. And he's trying to say like what Tark is doing is that like
He
the
even
impulse.
admits that he hates writing at one point, right?
Yes, he does. And it's very cynical and pessimistic, and it feels very like in existentialism, they like to say like there's this duality of the resigned knight of faith, right? Someone who's resigned from life and someone who's affirmed it. That's like Kierkegaardian. But at least I've seen it put into Sartre and so forth. Like this idea of like either you're an affirmative nihilist or you're a resigned nihilist. And I think that the end of the film, there's a strong level of resignation from our Stalker figure, which I briefly mentioned earlier, has a very haunting and kind of sad, I don't know, subtext that you think about when you think about how he likely died because of this film in ways. But you also think of this film as almost like a death letter. I know he made films after this, so he definitely went in different phases and was reawakened, right? But yeah, two films. So this wasn't his last film or anything. It wasn't his swan
And
song.
nostalgia really hits hard because it's about him saying goodbye to Russia. He makes that film. He flees the Soviet Union. He moves to Russia or Italy. Makes nostalgia. You can definitely feel that in there. And then he goes up to Sweden and works on Bergman's Island to make Sacrifice, kind of getting in touch with his film idol. So
Yeah, but I find him to be a very wary individual at the end. Like always seeking makes him very wary as an auteur. Just you could feel it in the film. You could feel it in the narrative arc. I mean, even if there's like a level of like, I don't know, rebirth or potential in the daughter figure, which gives a nice glimmer of, I don't know if it's not, I don't, maybe hope. I think they even throw the word hope somewhere in the end. And I was like, oh my gosh, I kind of like light bulb. Can't believe I'm seeing this word. Um,
yeah,
the,
I fully agree.
yeah,
Kind of the fact that she moves three glasses kind of hints back to the maybe a Trinity effect there. Ode to Joy kind of alludes to maybe children do have there is some hope for the future. So it doesn't quite end on a totally pessimistic note, even though the last time we see the Stalker, he's really just depressed that no one believes anymore. And that's the reason why these guys didn't ultimately go in the room, because they said that you're going to desire the thing that made you suffer the most, and you have to believe. And when they get up to that precipice of the door, they can't go in because they fear what they desire the most, and they don't believe. So essentially, I think that's essentially what it boils down to. Right outside of the room, there's that body of water that has a bunch of beakers in it. So it's almost like abandoned science. I'm not really sure what that ties into, but I thought that was fascinating that they had that many beakers floating around. Um, the stalker thrives on helping people. That was a big thing that comes up. What was the point of coming here in the first place? He just disables the bomb, throws it away. And then there's that really depressing shot of like a fish, like kind of poking at the bomb, but like there's oil kind of covering the surface of the water. So that's even more dread. And for some reason, I always remembered in this movie that when it starts raining, I thought it rained on them. But clearly, when I watched it this time, they're in this room, and then there's like this outside portion, and the rain starts falling outside. I mean, they had just mentioned that people don't believe anymore, so the flood, I don't know, maybe a stretch. But you also will clearly they hold on that shot forever. And do you recall the number that's on the wall behind them?
No.
It's 0. So almost like ground zero, or maybe yeah, they've just reached ultimate zero bottom
Yeah.
point.
Zero is almost in every sci-fi dystopian novel in some way on a metaphor. Like there's a famous
Cool.
Russian novel called We, that zero plays prominently, and I wonder if that informed this at all. Zero is common in a lot of like Shakespearean theory of Ophelia. That's far off, but I just mean like throughout literature, right? It's like the most symbolic number, so that works very well. But I love that you talk about like they neither of them have the nerve. I think they bring up the word the nerve.
Mhm.
There's the duality of conscience and nerve, and they have almost neither to go into the zone, right? Because they don't want to see what they truly desire, which is what Porcupine did, right? And then he saw the vapidity of his like life, and then committed suicide. But what I love is that like they're all kind of then failed individuals on a spiritual and level. They all lack faith, all three of them. Right, the writer is too preoccupied with sort of a mercenary approach to art. The scientist is too preoccupied with appealing to and capturing the
Changing the world.
laws. Yeah, the laws that appease civilization, or that can be commercialized for the public. And then the guide, I think, is slightly above them, but he's just someone, I don't know. He's the best character to me, the guy, the stalker. He's really uh, he's really a mixed emotional bag, which I appreciated. But even he didn't have the nerve to go in. Yet the daughter does, right? She doesn't go into the zone, right? But she has the faith to move the glasses, right? She can control her reality with her perception. She can break the laws of physics. So all those beakers, right? They're probably a reminder of the failure of physics, even. Um, like you said, the detritus and debris in the water are also like reminders of the failures of materialism, for example. So yeah, there's a strong sense of hope here, but there's a bleakness in the sense that like I don't think Tark really relates to the young girl. I think he feels like the old man and wants a rebirth for a new generation. But I feel like this film does have a sense of senescence to it, if I think about the author and who the author sees himself as in it. So it's not surprising that he passed not too long after this, to me, almost on a spiritual level. But that's just speculation there, and completely bereft of like uh, you know any rational thought. I'm just completely making tenuous claims. I just want to announce that. But for me, on like a sort of metaphorical spiritual level, this film feels
Mhm.
right. It's like feels like it's nearing the end of someone's artistic output. Just where it would make sense for an older senescent individual to see hope in the youth, but definitely not see hope in their own generation, in their own selves, right? And I feel like if there's the ciphers of Tark, the three men, don't really end the film on a positive, uplifting notes.
Right.
So, yeah.
And I mean, there's all the lore behind the film where he, got a chance to basically reshoot huge chunks of it to kind of retool it. And there's rumors that, he tried to abandon it throughout. So this was a very difficult film to make, and ultimately for the better, because I think this is the slowest moving fast film I think I can recall. It flies by, but it doesn't feel like it until it's over. Man, how depressing is it that they have that big wide shot at the end where he has Monkey on his shoulders, and then you see like the nuclear silos in the background. So nothing really has changed. The wife has a whole monologue about the root of her happiness and the sorrow. So that kind of falls back into the how she has a different mindset on the meaning of life in terms of what it means for the family. And my last thing I wanted to end on, any takes on the dog? The dog's kind of an interesting development. I mean, kind of sneaks in there during this dream. Not sure if it's supposed to represent something, but he's there at the end in the bar too. So maybe they did go somewhere.
Yeah, I love the dog. And I was lazy with the dog. I was like, oh, that's saying something. This dog followed them out of the zone, this loyal dog, right?
Yeah.
He's transported back. And what does this say? Right. And they bring him home. I didn't know where to take it though, as well. I did not know where to go
Eh,
with it.
Totally fair. I mean, you got the telephone in there. What the heck does that mean? Who knows?
Hmm. No
Because
clue
when
either.
he answers the phone, he's just like, no, this isn't the clinic. Goodbye. It's like, I don't know if
I
that
don't
was
know.
there's so much purpose beyond this in this film that it's hard to think that anything was, there's stray pieces, but you never know. To wrap things up, I mean, this movie's gotten better each time I watched it, and to really dig into the text of it and see all these metaphors and parallels and religious contexts and existential, and you're much better at all the big words than I am, but man, this is a really good movie. It's a 5 from me.
Nice, nice. I would say
Was it
I
worth the
get
wait for you?
oh, absolutely worth the wait. Can't believe I didn't watch it, especially when I was doing the like existential film marathon. But I gave it on Letterboxd 4 out of 5. I stick with the fact that it feels a little self-indulgent. It feels a little limited in its scope.
Mhm.
But for those things, or with that in mind, with that awareness, it's extremely uh, demanding and exacting and inspiring text, right? It's like the Grand Inquisitor from Dostoevsky. It's like almost on that level. I mean, this is a monumental film. Absolutely a must watch for anyone who considers themselves like a student of film and a student of life. Yeah. I'm not trying to diss it. I'm just trying to say, like, if I remade it, I would add different elements, and I would try to like bring its existentialist vision to different um, personas, right? Give it some flavor and some life outside of the like. I feel like one type of figure, one type of perspective in a way. Even though they're different perspectives, right? Even though they're science and art and so forth, right? And they're kind of opposites there. They feel very much of the same bent. So that's my one knock on it.
You seem like you read a lot. Do you see yourself reading the novel this is based off of?
I would love to, yeah. I have not though yet. So I'll add that to my list. It's a long list, but yeah, this is, I'm sure, very, very rewarding experience would be to read the text.
Um, it makes me wonder, like, falling back into that conversation about being an auteur at the end of his days, like you wonder if he's more of like there's probably pieces of him in all the characters, really, with probably because I definitely related to the struggle with having the faith to having the faith and stepping forward, and wonder how Tark kind of fit himself into there, or if he related more with the writer.
Yeah. And the question of calling, right? That's one of the toughest questions for any individual, no matter who you are. So I want to clarify one thing, make one last caveat, is that I don't think this only applies to like certain demographics. No way. It's a universal film. The themes are universal. Just the contours, the shades, the colors, the emotionality, I felt was a little limited, but the themes absolutely cosmic, right? And the idea of not being able to confront your calling because you don't have the audacity or the sovereignty or the autonomy or the tenacity, the resoluteness to have a
Give
calling.
yourself to it.
Yeah, to give yourself up to it, or because you're tainted by the seductions of immediacy and materialism, for example, and you shield that from yourself, you deny it in a self-abnegating way, right? Those are all there, and this is such a potent and powerful thing, right? Because yeah, we're all tempted, right? So it's very much that's very, very religious, right? The temptations, right? And the overcoming the temptation to do the true thing that you're called to do, right? Very metaphysical. Always hits when it's done right, and I think he does it well.
Nice. Well said throughout. Well, thanks so much, Paul, for joining me. Any socials you wanted to shout out?
Oh yeah, please, if you listen to podcasts on the regular, check out ours. We take a really unique approach to sports movies at Cinematic Underdogs. You can find us over at Spotify, iTunes, Apple, whatever. Apple is iTunes, right? Every platform.
Yep.
Yeah. We're on even the smaller ones like Podbean and so forth. You can find me on Twitter. I really run our Twitter handle on at Cinematic Under. So if you just put that in the search, you'll find me. Add us. I don't stick to film on there. I like to talk about a little bit of sports too. Actually, it's like a little space. Actually, throw some of that because it's thematically relevant. Also, Letterboxd. I'm at Cinematic Underdogs. Put in the search, you'll find me right away. You can read my rambling reviews on everything. It runs the board, full smorgasbord of takes that I have there. And I also write weekly for a website called 25YL for the film obsessive part. I contribute to it was called What's the Buzz? So that's their main SEO ranking. So if you still put in What's the Buzz 25YL, that's what's going to bring you easily to that like weekly article catalog. But now it's called it's Larks and Rex. So they changed the name, but it's fun. I just get a subtle recommendation each week that I do there as well. So kind of all over. And my top dose suggestion, check out our pod. We definitely go way deep and dive in ways that you wouldn't expect into sports movies. So thanks for having me on. I had a great time talking about soccer.
Stalker.
Oh, that's such a good homonym you did, right? Was that a malapropism? Malapropism? I don't know. Or gaffe?
I really appreciated your very scholarly take on it. Please follow the Average Joe's Movie Club on YouTube, and I'm on Letterboxd. Joey's on Letterboxd. Paul's on Letterboxd. Got to be there. Have a great day, everyone, and keep watching great movies. Bye now.